everybody. Welcome to this exciting episode of Bob the Sign Man. Well, today I have to do a little makeover. A school bought this for their school crosswalk up in a place in Angwin, California. And we don't buy these for the schools because they cost a lot, and all of our schools are in rural areas. So these would be out in the middle of a rural road. And this has been out for a little while, and you can see what happens. It gets a little road rash from people hitting it. They are spring loaded, so they will, kind of bounce back. But anyways, the school bought this, and we were redoing the crosswalks up there, and it says school state law, stop for pedestrians within a crosswalk. Well, in California, we don't stop for pedestrians, we yield for pedestrians. So I have to change this to yield. A lot of people wonder what's the difference between stop and yield. Well, the laws can be very specific. And California, you must yield to a pedestrian. That's the way the law is, that you must yield to a pedestrian within the crosswalk. Now, there's no law in California that says you have to completely stop and wait for the pedestrian to completely cross a crosswalk before you can go. So, okay, I did find this. In California, the law says the driver of the vehicle has to yield the right-of-way to the pedestrian crossing. It doesn't say you have to stop, it says you have to yield. And then according to the official pedestrian crosswalk laws, California Vehicle Code, yada, 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 21950, states that drivers are required to yield the right-of-way to pedestrians crossing the road within a marked or unmarked crosswalk. What an unmarked crosswalk is any intersection that doesn't have a crosswalk. As long as you're crossing at the corners there, that's considered an unmarked crosswalk. I'd advise you, if you ever visit California, you run through the crosswalks. Don't always wait for people to stop. I have so much faith in humanity these days. I look both ways before I cross a one-way street. So you can kind of run through a little quick tip here how I'm going to fix this. My plan is to cut a piece of EC to cover this up and then just put the yield sticker on it. Sounds easy. Stick around. We'll see how easy it is. Okay, we're going to go ahead and weed these out. The machine's already cut everything out for me. They're just basically little tiny yield signs is what they are. There we go. Ready to go. The cutter I've showed you before, it cuts off the top layer of the sign, and it leaves the this film on top of this plastic. Now it's designed just to cut through that thin layer of EC film, which is electric cut film. It's from 3M, and now it allows me then the cutter cut everything out, and it allows me to pick everything out that I don't need. And we're going to put some transfer tape on it. Okay, here we go with the transfer tape. Pulls out, it's really easy. I think I've showed this before, my holder that I use for my transfer tape. And we're just going to cut the transfer tape away. This over, and then we'll just trim around our yield sign. Go, ready to go. Okay, now that I have my yield sign cut out, I'm going to put it on a 9x9 piece of white diamond grade material. And what I want to do, instead of simply peeling it and applying it, I want it to stick nice. I don't want any air bubbles to show in it. And if you just try to roll it through your roller, they never come out right because they're so. There's no backing behind it, no sign or anything. So what I do, little tip here, you got small stuff you're working with, just put a sign blank down, okay? Then what I do is I will peel up corner of this. And I'll just cut away some of that plastic film there. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and place my design down there. And I'm just going to put it kind of centered in here where I want it. I'm just going to do the very tip of it. What I'll do is I'll roll this through now. Now I have a nice flat surface for the sign to sit on, or for the transfer, and then I'll just finish peeling that off. And now, careful not to touch your EC because it'll leave fingerprints. And now I can just roll this through. Roll it through a couple of times. Okay, now when I peel off my transfer tape, there we go. No air bubbles. It's nice and smooth. That's why you need a nice smooth surface to work on like that. So there's a little tip there from the sign man. Next, all we have to do now is apply this to the sign. Okay, now that we got our yield sticker made, it'll cover the area that we need to. And pretty simple. I'll just peel the back off. And it's straight in there. All right, so there we are, already school, state law, yield for pedestrians within the crosswalk. Got both sides done. And like I said, in California, the law does state that you have to yield. It doesn't say you have to stop, but you have to yield, which means basically, I guess you still have to stop technically. The law, though, does say that you don't have to completely wait for him to cross the street, but it's still the driver's responsibility to try to safeguard the pedestrian.
Okay, and here's another thing in California. Now, you know, other states might be different, but this is California, and God knows we're always different. There is no law in California saying a driver has to wait for the pedestrian to finish crossing the entire crosswalk before the driver can proceed. However, the pedestrian safety is paramount. Drivers can go when they are a safe distance from the pedestrian. A lot of people are under the conception that you have to wait until the pedestrian is completely across the street, but you have to make it safe. You know, there's so many laws with the pedestrians and stuff that it's crazy. It's also up to the pedestrian to make sure that everything is fine. I'm sure we've seen this all the time. You're driving down the street and you're just close to a intersection, and then there's a crosswalk, and then the pedestrian just walks right out in front of you, and then they throw their hands up like, hey, you didn't slam on the brakes, come to a complete skid for me. You know, it's up to the pedestrian too to know when it's safe to cross the street. It seems like a lot of people never used to walk with their parents, or your parents failed in trying to teach them properly to cross the streets. You just got to make sure that it's safe these days. You know, there's no sense of insisting on the right of way. I'm right, I'm going to do this. And, you know, people are so distracted these days. I know when I go to work in the morning, I'm not distracted. I'm just driving along, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's like, hey, well, I didn't see that pedestrian. They were crossing when it's so dark. And then I look in back of me, and I think to myself, there's not a car in back of me. There's not a car in front of me. I'm on this road. I'm the only car there, and the pedestrian has to walk out in front of me. I mean, let's use some common sense here, pedestrians. So there's my little soapbox there for a little while. Sorry, I got carried away. But anyways, this is kind of all pertaining to my sticker that I had to change, the stop to the yield. And you know, let's just watch out for people and be nice to people.
I'm sure we've all had those instances where you stop, you're in the 2-lane, you stop here, and this car just comes by and doesn't see the car. So you got to pay attention to when you're crossing the streets. I see so many pedestrians now just walk out in front of the car, cell phone in ear, you know, on ear or whatever, or they have their well, it used to be a Walkman. I guess you can't call it a Walkman anymore. Times have changed so much. You can't even use an iPod anymore. Those are dinosaurs. I still use an iPod. Still have a Walkman. So you have to, the guys have I guess the big thing now is those Beats headphones. They can't hear nothing. Everybody's oblivious to everything, and it's all about me all the time. So just be a little careful when you're crossing sidewalks, especially in the mornings. It gets a little dusk now when I go to work. And sometimes you just don't see the pedestrians. You should be scanning all the time for pedestrians. Nobody wants to hit anybody, regardless whose fault it is.
Okay, here's a little back on our crosswalk safety. There's people who have told me before when I've said this, yes, you have to stop for a pedestrian and you have to stop for bicycles and all that. Well, in order not to hit them, yeah, you should. But here's the California Vehicle Code, okay? It defines what it is a pedestrian in California. See right here, it says in California. It's because it determines who has to abide by California pedestrian laws. Okay, a pedestrian is anybody who is walking, riding a motorized assistive mobility device because they cannot walk, or riding something that is propelled by their own efforts other than a bicycle. So bicycles are not pedestrians. Okay, people who are using the following devices to get around are considered to be a pedestrian. A skateboard. So you have to yield to a skateboard in a crosswalk. Scooters, as long as it's not an electric scooter or e-scooter. Those little foot scooters that people use? Yes, those. Roller skates, roller blades. If somebody's on skis, that doesn't snow where I live, so that'd be kind of funny. Or ice skates, wheelchairs, motorized wheelchairs, or crutches. Okay, you're considered a pedestrian. Now, the following people are not pedestrians: bicycle, e-bikes, motorized bikes, hoverboards, e-scooters. One time I was crossing a road and I'm going along. It was a hot day that day and I had my window down and a guy comes riding his bike through and he yells at me and says, "Hey, I'm in the crosswalk." And I said, "Hey, you're on a bicycle, you're not a pedestrian." So he let me know that I was right by giving me the #1 sign, and I'm like, well, obviously he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, I wasn't going to hit the guy or anything, but I saw him coming up the road and I kept going through and he thought that I should have to yield to him. No, you don't have to yield to him, but you shouldn't hit him anyways. So there's a little thing there. So because I know somebody's going to come back and say, well, no, you're wrong. You have to stop.
Anyways, little tip from the sign man. Catch you next exciting episode.